The twin moons of Aruvia cast their perpetual golden glow across the crystalline plaza, where Derek Cale stood waiting beneath the memory-lit sky. The archive world hummed with the soft resonance of living crystal, its bone-white corridors branching like neural pathways through the terraformed moon's surface. Each crystal core pulsed with stored memories, the accumulated knowledge of 1,000 civilizations preserved in their luminous depths. Derek adjusted the collar of his archival robes, the fabric woven with bioresponsive threads that shifted color with the ambient light. As a human archivist, he was something of an anomaly on Aruvia, but his expertise in xenological documentation had earned him a place among the moon's scholarly elite. Tonight, however, he was here for a different kind of transfer altogether. The hover platform descended from the upper reaches of the citadel with mechanical precision, its anti-gravity generators humming a low, steady note. As it settled onto the plaza's crystalline surface, Derek caught his first glimpse of the cargo that had been deemed too burdensome for Aruvian society to bear. She sat in a specialized hover chair, her slender form draped in the simple gray robes of the disenfranchised. Her skin held the distinctive dusk blue hue of the Aruvian Mindweaver caste, though Derek noted immediately that she bore none of the traditional neural interface markings that would indicate active status. Her white hair fell like a curtain around her shoulders, partially obscuring her face as she stared down at her motionless hands. The administrator who accompanied the platform was a tall, imposing Aruvian with the characteristic high cheekbones and elongated limbs of his people. His ceremonial robes marked him as a member of the Council of Memory, and his expression held the cold efficiency of bureaucratic necessity. Human archivist Derek Cale, the administrator, intoned his voice, carrying the formal cadence of official business. He extended a crystalline data slate toward Derek with one pale, long-fingered hand. By decree of the Council of Memory, you are now legally responsible for the care and containment of the former Mindweaver, designated as Avlithvar. All relevant documentation and medical records are contained within this archive. Derek accepted the data slate, its surface warm to the touch and humming with encrypted information. He glanced at the figure in the hover chair, noting the way she seemed to shrink further into herself at the administrator's words. "Former Mindweaver," he asked quietly. The administrator's expression remained impassive. "Avlithvar has been struck from the caste registry for crimes against the preservation of memory. She is no longer recognized as a person of standing within Aruvian society." He paused, his pale eyes reflecting the ambient crystal light. "Your species has shown adaptability in caring for damaged individuals. The Council trusts you will find an appropriate solution." With those words, the administrator activated the hover platform's controls and departed, leaving Derek alone in the plaza with his unexpected charge. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant harmonics of the archive crystals and the soft hum of the hover chair's stabilizers. Derek approached slowly, careful not to startle her. "Avlithvar," he said softly, trying the name in his human accent. When she didn't respond, he crouched down beside the hover chair, bringing himself to her eye level. "My name is Derek. I'm going to take you somewhere safe." For a moment, her pale violet eyes met his, and Derek saw depths of intelligence and pain that took his breath away. There was a flicker of something in her gaze, perhaps gratitude, perhaps resignation, before she looked away again. She made no sound, offered no acknowledgement beyond that brief moment of contact. Derek stood and took hold of the hover chair's guidance handles. The chair responded to his touch, its bio-neural interface adapting to his human physiology, with only a moment's hesitation. As they moved through the crystal corridors toward the residential quarters, Derek found himself studying the woman in his care. Even in her current state, there was an undeniable grace to her features. Her bone structure spoke of aristocratic lineage, and the way she held herself suggested years of scholarly discipline. Whatever crimes she had been accused of, Derek found it difficult to reconcile this quiet, broken figure with the image of a dangerous criminal. The residential suite Derek had prepared was located in one of the archive's quieter sections, where the crystal harmonics were muted and the lighting could be adjusted to accommodate human circadian rhythms. The rooms were spacious and comfortable, furnished with adaptive technology that could respond to a variety of alien physiologies. Derek guided the hoverchair through the main living area, pointing out the various amenities as they went. "The lighting system is voice-activated," he explained, demonstrating with a simple command that adjusted the ambient glow to a warmer, more intimate setting. "The environmental controls can be adjusted for temperature and humidity. There's a full data terminal here if you need access to the archives." He led her to a small alcove that served as a private study, its walls lined with shelves containing both physical books and crystalline data storage units. A collection of flowering plants from various worlds added color and life to the space, their bioluminescent petals providing a gentle, natural illumination. "This will be your space," Derek said, positioning the hoverchair near a comfortable reading nook. "You can access the archive databases from here, though some restricted sections will require my authorization." He paused, uncertain how to proceed. "I've prepared some tea if you'd like it. The replicator can produce most common Aruvian dietary requirements." Derek moved to a small side table and prepared a cup of thermal-regulated tea, selecting a blend he knew was favored by Aruvian scholars. The aromatic steam carried hints of crystalline minerals and exotic botanicals as he set the cup within easy reach of the hoverchair. "I'll leave you to settle in," he said gently. "My quarters are just down the corridor if you need anything. There's no pressure to speak or interact if you're not ready. I understand this transition must be difficult." He left her there in the soft light of the study, surrounded by the accumulated knowledge of ages, with only the gentle hum of the archive crystals for company. As he retreated to his own quarters, Derek found himself wondering about the circumstances that had led to this moment. What could a scholar have done to warrant such complete exile from her own people? The next morning, Derek returned to find the teacup empty and clean, sitting precisely where he had left it. There was no other sign that Avlithvar had moved from the study, but the simple fact that she had accepted his offering felt like a small victory. Over the following days, Derek established a routine that respected her silence, while offering opportunities for connection. Each morning, he would bring fresh tea and perhaps a small meal, leaving them within reach without expectation of acknowledgement. In the afternoons, he would work on his own archival projects in the common areas, his presence available, but not intrusive. It was during one of these quiet afternoons that Derek decided to share his current research project. He had been working to reconstruct fragments from a restricted vault, pieces of historical record that had been deliberately obscured or damaged. The work required careful analysis of symbolic languages and cultural context, exactly the kind of scholarly pursuit that would have once been second nature to a mindweaver. Derek activated the room's central holographic projector and began displaying a series of ancient glyphs. The symbols hung in the air like golden ghosts, their meaning partially lost to time and deliberate censorship. As he worked, Derek began reading aloud from his notes, his voice filling the comfortable silence of the study. "The Orvian chronicles speak of a great schism in their society," he said, manipulating the glyphs with hand gestures to reveal different interpretations. "But the official records have been sanitized. The true nature of the conflict has been deliberately obscured." From the corner of his eye, Derek noticed Avlithvar leaning forward slightly in her hoverchair, her violet eyes focused on the projected symbols. Encouraged by this sign of interest, he continued his analysis. "This glyph here," Derek indicated a particularly complex symbol that seemed to shift and flow like liquid light. The official translation calls it preservation, but the contextual markers suggest something more aggressive, perhaps enforcement or even suppression. Suddenly, Avlithvar's hand moved. It was a small gesture, barely perceptible, but she tilted her wrist and made a subtle adjustment to one of the projected glyphs. The symbol rotated slightly under her influence, its meaning shifting from passive preservation to active defiance. Derek stared at the corrected symbol, understanding flooding through him. "Of course," he breathed. "It's not about preserving the status quo. It's about resisting it." He looked at Avlithvar with new respect. "You're right. The entire passage changes meaning with that adjustment." For the first time since her arrival, Avlithvar met his gaze directly. There was intelligence burning in her eyes, a fierce intellect that had been suppressed but not extinguished. She said nothing, but her small nod of acknowledgement sent a thrill of connection through Derek's chest. From that moment, their relationship began to evolve. Derek would bring his more challenging research problems to the study, spreading holographic displays and data fragments across the room like a three-dimensional puzzle. Avlithvar would watch sometimes for hours before making subtle corrections or adjustments that revealed hidden meanings or alternative interpretations. Their communication developed its own language of gesture and implication. A slight tilt of her head might indicate approval of Derek's analysis. A gentle adjustment to a holographic symbol could reveal layers of meaning that had been deliberately obscured. Slowly, carefully, they began to rebuild the lost histories that others had tried to erase. It was during one of these sessions that Derek made a discovery that would change everything. Deep in the archive's restricted databases, he found references to a sealed section of the facility vaults that had been locked away during the great purges of the previous century. "Look at this," Derek said, projecting a schematic of the archive's lower levels. "There are entire sections down here that aren't supposed to exist. According to these old maintenance records, they were sealed off and forgotten." Avlithvar studied the projected blueprint with intense focus, her eyes tracing the hidden corridors and forgotten chambers. When she looked up at Derek, there was something new in her expression, a spark of purpose that had been absent since her arrival. Derek felt his pulse quicken. "You think there's something down there worth finding, don't you?" Her nod was barely perceptible, but it was enough. Derek began planning their descent into the forgotten depths of the archive, driven by scholarly curiosity and the growing desire to help Avlithvar reclaim whatever had been taken from her. The sealed western wing of the archive was accessible through a maintenance tunnel that branched off from the main research levels. Derek had spent days studying the facility's architectural plans, identifying the safest route to the forgotten chambers below. The tunnel systems were old, but well-maintained, their bio-responsive lighting activating as they approached. Derek walked alongside of Avlithvar's hoverchair as they navigated the narrow passages, the walls humming with the distant resonance of the archive's crystal matrix. The deeper they went, the more the environment seemed to change. The air grew thicker, heavy, with the weight of accumulated memory, and the particular atmosphere that clung to forbidden knowledge. "According to the records," Derek said quietly, his voice echoing softly in the confined space, "this section was sealed during the Great Revision, when the Council decided that certain historical periods were too dangerous to preserve." He glanced at Avlithvar, noting the way her hands gripped the arms of her hoverchair. "I'm beginning to suspect that your erasure from the caste registry might be connected to similar concerns about dangerous knowledge." The tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber, its ceiling lost in shadows above them. Ancient crystal formations jutted from the walls, like organic architecture, their surfaces dark and dormant. This was clearly older construction predating the current archive by centuries. Derek activated a portable illumination unit, its beam revealing rows of sealed vault doors stretching into the distance. Each door bore the warning symbols of the Council of Memory, but many also carried older markings that spoke of different authorities and different times. These aren't just random storage vaults, Derek realized, studying the architectural patterns. This was once a separate facility entirely, a rival archive perhaps, or a repository for forbidden research. Avlithvar's hoverchair moved forward on its own, responding to her bio-neural commands as she guided it between the vault doors. She stopped before one particular entrance, its surface marked with symbols that seemed to resonate with some deep recognition. Derek approached the vault door, running his hands over the complex locking mechanism. "This is advanced bioneural security," he observed. "It would require authorized Mindweaver access to open." He turned to look at Avlithvar, understanding beginning to dawn. "This was your research, wasn't it, before you were erased?" Her eyes closed briefly, pain flickering across her features. When she opened them again, Derek saw years of suppressed grief and rage burning in their violet depths. The lock responded to Avlithvar's bioneural signature. Despite her official erasure, the ancient systems recognizing patterns that went deeper than administrative records. The vault door dilated open with a soft hiss, revealing a chamber filled with research materials and experimental apparatus. Derek's breath caught as he took in the contents of the vault. Holographic displays still flickered with half-completed calculations and bioadaptive technology that he recognized as far in advance of current Aruvian capabilities lined the walls. This wasn't just research, it was revolutionary work that could have changed their understanding of neural interfaces and biomechanical integration. "You were working on adaptive prosthetics," Derek said, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. "Technology that could restore function to damaged neural pathways." He turned to Avlithvar, his voice filled with sudden understanding. "And someone decided that this work was too dangerous to continue." A new voice cut through the chamber's silence, cold and authoritative. "The work was deemed heretical and destructive to the natural order of caste hierarchy." Derek spun around to find an archive enforcer, standing in the vault's entrance, his ceremonial armor gleaming in the portable light. The enforcer was tall, even by Aruvian standards, his pale features sharp with disapproval, and his neural interface markings pulsing with active authority. "Human Archivist Kale." The enforcer continued, his voice carrying the weight of official sanction. "You have exceeded your authorized access and violated containment protocols. You will return the erased individual to proper custody immediately." Derek stepped protectively in front of Avlithvar's hoverchair, his human bulk seeming small compared to the enforcer's imposing presence. "She's done nothing wrong. We're conducting legitimate archival research." The enforcer's expression remained unchanged. "The individual designated as Avlithvar has no legal standing to conduct research or access restricted materials. Her erasure from the caste registry removes all such privileges permanently." "That's ridiculous." Derek shot back, his scholarly training rebelling against such arbitrary destruction of knowledge. "She's one of the most brilliant minds in the field of bioneural integration. Her work could help countless individuals with neural trauma. Her work threatens the fundamental structures that maintain order within our society." The enforcer replied coldly. "Adaptive prosthetics that could restore function to any individual regardless of natural ability or caste standing represent an unacceptable challenge to established hierarchy." Derek felt a chill of understanding. Avlithvar hadn't been erased for committing a crime. She had been silenced for developing technology that could give hope to those the system had written off as permanently damaged or inferior. "You're afraid," Derek said quietly. "You're afraid that her technology could make your rigid caste system irrelevant." The enforcer's neural interface markings flared brighter. "Stand aside, human. Your presence here is tolerated only as long as you comply with council directives." Derek remained in place, his jaw set with determination. Behind him, he could hear the soft hum of Avlithvar's hoverchair as she maneuvered closer. He could feel her presence at his back, and something in that proximity gave him strength. "No," Derek said firmly. "I won't let you erase her again. She has the right to exist, to continue her work, to contribute to the advancement of knowledge." The enforcer reached for the restraint devices on his belt, his movements precise and threatening. "You will comply, or you will both be contained." It was then that Avlithvar spoke her first word since arriving on the archive moon. "Enough." The word rang through the vault chamber with surprising power, carrying with it years of suppressed rage and defiance. The enforcer, actually took a step back, his neural interface markings flickering with confusion. Avlithvar's hover chair moved forward, positioning itself between Derek and the enforcer. Though she remained seated, there was nothing weak or helpless about her posture now. Her violet eyes blazed with intelligence and determination, and her voice, though hoarse from disuse, carried the authority of her former position. I am Avlithvar, first researcher of the Mindweaver cast, developer of the Adaptive Neural Integration Protocol, and keeper of the lost archives of therapeutic technology. Each word was carefully chosen, delivered with the precision of a scholar reclaiming her identity. I was not erased for criminal activity. I was silenced because my work threatened to disrupt your comfortable system of biological determinism. The enforcer's hand moved toward his neural interface, perhaps to call for reinforcement or to activate some kind of restraint protocol. But Avlithvar's next words stopped him cold. Touch that interface and I will broadcast the true records of the Great Revision to every archive crystal on this moon, she said, her voice growing stronger with each syllable. The real history of what was lost, what was destroyed, and why. Every student, every researcher, every citizen will learn how much knowledge has been sacrificed to preserve the illusion of natural hierarchy. Derek watched in amazement as the enforcer's confidence wavered. Whatever authority Avlithvar had once possessed, whatever knowledge she held, it was enough to give even a council enforcer pause. You cannot threaten the stability of our civilization, the enforcer said, but his voice lacked its earlier certainty. I'm not threatening anything, Avlithvar replied. I'm offering truth. My research, my archives, my understanding of what was lost when the council decided that some minds were worth saving and others were not. She leaned forward slightly in her hover chair. Leave us to our work, or explain to your superiors why you forced the release of information they've spent decades trying to suppress. The enforcer stood frozen for a long moment, calculating odds and consequences. Finally, without another word, he turned and departed the vault, his footsteps echoing in the tunnel beyond. Derek turned to look at Avlithvar, amazement and admiration clear in his expression. That was incredible, he said softly. You found your voice again. Avlithvar's response was quieter now, more vulnerable. I never lost it, she admitted. I just forgot that it was worth using. The aftermath of their confrontation with the enforcer marked a turning point in both their research and their relationship. Avlithvar's rediscovered voice seemed to unlock something fundamental within her, a sense of purpose and agency that had been dormant during her period of imposed silence. Working together in the hidden vault, they began the painstaking process of reconstructing her research. The adaptive prosthetic technology that had been deemed so threatening was elegant in its simplicity, using bio-neural interfaces to create direct connections between damaged nervous systems and mechanical enhancement systems. The beauty of the design, Avlithvar explained, as she guided Derek through the technical specifications, is that it doesn't replace damaged neural pathways. Instead, it creates new pathways that work in harmony with existing biological systems. Derek studied the holographic displays with growing excitement. This could help millions of individuals across dozens of species. Neural trauma, degenerative conditions, congenital disabilities, they could all be addressed with variations of this technology. Which is exactly why the council feared it. Avlithvar said, her voice carrying notes of old bitterness. A technology that could restore function to any individual regardless of their natural physical capabilities threatens the fundamental premise that biological hierarchy is divinely ordained. As they worked to reconstruct the research, Derek began to understand the personal cost that Avlithvar had paid for her innovations. Her own paralysis was the result of neural damage sustained during the initial testing phases of the prosthetic system. She had been using herself as a test subject when her research partner, a Mindweaver named Yeon, had betrayed her to the council out of fear for his own position. He was afraid that association with heretical research would destroy his career, Avlithvar explained during one of their long working sessions. When the council began investigating our work, he provided them with everything they needed to classify me as a dangerous radical. Derek felt anger burning in his chest at the thought of such betrayal. And your paralysis? A feedback surge during a calibration test, she said simply. The neural interface overloaded, causing permanent damage to my motor control pathways. Yeon convinced the council that it was evidence of the technology's inherent danger, rather than a correctable design flaw. Despite the pain of these revelations, Avlithvar seemed to grow stronger with each day they spent in the hidden vault. Her voice became clearer and more confident, and Derek began to see glimpses of the brilliant researcher she had once been. It was during their third week of reconstruction work that they made the breakthrough that would change everything. Hidden within the vault's deepest storage systems, they discovered a complete prototype of the adaptive prosthetic system, one that incorporated all of Avlithvar's final improvements and safety modifications. "This is it," she breathed, her hands trembling as she examined the sleek, bio-responsive device. "This is the final version, the one I was working on when Yeon betrayed me." Derek studied the prosthetic system with scientific fascination. It was beautiful in its complexity, a perfect fusion of biological understanding and mechanical precision. The neural interface components were designed to integrate seamlessly with Aruvian physiology, while the mechanical elements could adapt to a wide range of physical requirements. "Do you think it would work?" Derek asked quietly. "After all this time, could it actually restore your mobility?" Avlithvar was quiet for a long moment, her violet eyes reflecting the holographic displays around them. "There's only one way to find out," she said finally. The installation process was delicate and complex, requiring precise calibration of bio-neural interfaces and careful integration with Avlithvar's existing nervous system. Derek assisted with the technical aspects, while monitoring her vital signs, his human perspective proving valuable in identifying potential complications that Aruvian medical training might overlook. The prosthetic system consisted of a series of neural interface nodes that would be surgically implanted along her spine, connected to mechanical assistance elements that would integrate with her muscular and skeletal systems. The technology was designed to work gradually, allowing her nervous system to adapt to the new pathways over time. "The initial activation will probably be overwhelming," Avlithvar warned, as Derek made the final calibration adjustments. "My neural pathways haven't carried motor control signals for years. It may take time for my brain to remember how to use them." Derek positioned himself near the main control console, ready to shut down the system if anything went wrong. "Are you ready?" Avlithvar closed her eyes and nodded. "Activate the primary interface." The prosthetic system came online with a soft, harmonic tone, its bio-responsive elements beginning their integration with Avlithvar's nervous system. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then Derek saw her eyelids flutter, and her breathing became more rapid. "Avlithvar, how do you feel?" Her eyes opened wide with wonder and confusion. "I can feel them," she whispered. "My legs. I can feel my legs again." The first movement was tiny, barely perceptible. A slight twitch in her left foot, followed by a tremor in her right ankle. Derek watched with growing excitement as the prosthetic system began establishing neural pathways that had been dormant for years. "Take it slowly," Derek advised. "Let your nervous system adjust gradually." But Avlithvar was already attempting to stand her hands, gripping the arms of her hoverchair as she tried to transfer her weight to her legs. The prosthetic system responded, providing mechanical support, while her reawakening neural pathways struggled to coordinate movement. She fell almost immediately, her legs unable to support her weight, despite the mechanical assistance. Derek caught her before she hit the ground, his arms wrapping around her slight frame as she struggled with the frustration of partial success. "It's okay," Derek said, gently helping her back into the hoverchair. "This is just the beginning. Your nervous system needs time to relearn patterns it hasn't used in years." Over the following days, they established a careful rehabilitation routine. Each morning, Avlithvar would activate the prosthetic system and attempt increasingly complex movements. Each failure was followed by analysis and adjustment, gradually refining the interface between biological intention and mechanical execution. Derek marveled at her determination. Despite repeated falls and the obvious frustration of systems that responded inconsistently to her commands, Avlithvar never gave up. Each setback only seemed to strengthen her resolve to reclaim the physical autonomy that had been taken from her. "Again," she would say, after each fall, allowing Derek to help her to her feet before attempting another few steps across the vault chamber. It was on the 8th day of rehabilitation that everything finally came together. Derek was adjusting the prosthetic system's balance algorithms when Avlithvar suddenly stood up from her hover chair without assistance. Her movements were careful and deliberate, but there was no mistaking the fact that she was supporting her own weight. "Derek," she said quietly, her voice filled with wonder. "Look." He turned to see her taking her first independent steps, the prosthetic system responding smoothly to her neural commands. Her gait was still uncertain, and she moved with the careful precision of someone relearning a fundamental skill, but she was walking. Derek felt tears welling up in his eyes as he watched her cross the chamber, her white hair flowing behind her as she moved with increasing confidence. When she reached the far wall and turned back toward him, her face was radiant with joy and triumph. "I had forgotten," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "I had forgotten what it felt like to move through the world on my own terms." Without thinking, Derek crossed the chamber and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around in a moment of pure celebration. When he set her down, they stood close together, both breathing hard from excitement and exertion. "You did it," Derek said softly. "You reclaimed everything they tried to take from you." Avlithvar's hand rose to touch his face, her fingers tracing the lines of wonder and admiration she found there. "No," she replied quietly. "We did it. I could never have done this alone." The days following Avlithvar's successful rehabilitation were filled with both triumph and tension. Word of their activities in the sealed vault had somehow reached the Council of Memory, and Derek could feel the pressure building towards some kind of official response. It came in the form of an official summons to appear before the council chambers, ostensibly to account for their unauthorized access to restricted materials. Derek knew that this was really about the council's fear of what Avlithvar represented, living proof that their system of biological determinism was both arbitrary and cruel. "They're going to offer me reinstatement," Avlithvar said, as they prepared for the hearing. She was standing now, the prosthetic system integrated so seamlessly with her movements that her earlier paralysis seemed like a distant memory. "Conditional reinstatement with restrictions on my research and requirements for ongoing supervision." Derek felt a chill of apprehension. "Will you accept?" Avlithvar's smile was sharp and determined. "No. I'm going to tell them exactly what I think of their mercy." The council chambers were vast and imposing, designed to overwhelm supplicants with the weight of accumulated authority. Ancient crystal formations lined the walls, their surfaces inscribed with the names and achievements of generations of approved scholars. It was a monument to institutional memory, carefully curated and rigorously controlled. The council members sat arrayed in a semicircle, their pale faces impassive behind ceremonial masks that enhanced their neural interface capabilities. At the center sat the High Archivist, her ancient features carved with the lines of a lifetime spent preserving and protecting the established order. "Avlithvar." The High Archivist spoke, her voice carrying the authority of absolute power. "You have demonstrated that your erasure from the caste registry may have been premature. Your recent activities suggest that your capabilities remain intact, despite your earlier transgressions." Derek watched as Avlithvar stepped forward, her movement confident and graceful thanks to the prosthetic system. She stood before the council without deference or apology, her violet eyes blazing with intelligence and determination. "The council is prepared to offer conditional reinstatement," the High Archivist continued. "Your research activities will be subject to ongoing review, and your access to sensitive materials will be limited. However, you will be permitted to resume a modified version of your scholarly pursuits." The chamber fell silent as the council waited for Avlithvar's response. Derek could feel the tension in the air, the weight of institutional expectation pressing down on them both. Avlithvar's response was clear and unwavering. "No." The single word echoed through the vast chamber, like a physical blow. Several council members leaned forward in surprise, their neural interfaces flaring with confusion. "You decline reinstatement," the High Archivist asked, her ancient voice, betraying the first hint of uncertainty Derek had heard from her. "I decline to pretend that your mercy has any meaning," Avlithvar replied, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "You erased me not because I committed any crime, but because my work threatened your comfortable assumptions about biological hierarchy. You condemn me to silence and isolation, not to protect society, but to protect your own power." The High Archivist's mask seemed to shimmer with suppressed anger. "Your research threatened the stability of our civilization." "My research offered hope to those you had written off as permanently damaged," Avlithvar shot back. "You call it heretical because it suggests that biological destiny is not divinely ordained, that individuals can transcend the limitations imposed by birth or injury." Derek watched in amazement as Avlithvar continued her defiant speech, each word carefully chosen for maximum impact. "I stand before you now as living proof that your system is built on lies," she declared. "I have reclaimed my mobility, my voice, and my agency despite your best efforts to erase me. And I will continue my work, not as a reinstated member of your caste system, but as an independent researcher dedicated to expanding the possibilities available to all sentient beings." The council chambers erupted in chaos as the implications of her words sank in. Several council members began speaking at once, their neural interfaces flashing with rapid communication protocols. The High Archivist raised her hand for silence, her ancient features twisted with anger and frustration. "You cannot simply declare independence from the caste system," she said coldly. "You are Aruvian. You are subject to our laws and our authority." Avlithvar smiled, and Derek felt his heart skip at the fierce joy he saw in her expression. "Watch me," she said simply. As they left the council chambers, Derek could hear the heated arguments continuing behind them. Avlithvar's public rejection of the council's authority had sent shockwaves through the established order, and he suspected there would be consequences. But as they walked through the crystal corridors of the archive, Derek realized that something fundamental had changed. Avlithvar moved with a confidence and purpose that went far beyond her physical rehabilitation. She had reclaimed not just her mobility, but her sense of self-worth and agency. "What happens now?" Derek asked, as they made their way back toward their quarters. Avlithvar paused beside one of the great crystal formations that lined the corridor, its surface pulsing with stored memories. As they watched, new inscriptions began to appear on the crystal's surface, delicate script that seemed to write itself in response to some deep recognition. "The archive is acknowledging me," Avlithvar said in wonder. "It's inscribing my name in the ancestral script, recording my story as part of the preserved memory of our people." Derek read the flowing characters as they appeared, his training in xenological linguistics, allowing him to follow their meaning. The crystal was indeed recording Avlithvar's story, but not as the council would have told it. Instead, it told the truth of brilliant research, suppressed of a scholar, silenced for challenging orthodoxy of courage and determination, triumphing over institutional oppression. "The archive crystals respond to truth," Avlithvar explained. "They cannot be censored or manipulated by administrative decree. My real story will be preserved here long after the council's version has been forgotten." As they continued through the corridors, Derek noticed that other crystal formations were beginning to respond as well. Avlithvar's presence seemed to trigger some kind of recognition protocol, causing dormant memory cores to activate and begin recording her passage. "You're creating a new archive," Derek realized. "An uncensored record of what really happened." Avlithvar nodded, her expression thoughtful. "And not just my story. All the stories that have been suppressed, all the research that has been classified as too dangerous, all the individuals who have been erased for inconvenient truths. She turned to look at Derek, her violet eyes bright with possibility. Will you help me build it? Derek's answer came without hesitation. Always. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity as they worked to establish their new archive. Using Avlithvar's restored access codes and Derek's administrative privileges, they began systematically recovering and preserving suppressed research from across the facility. The adaptive prosthetic technology was just the beginning. Hidden in the sealed vaults and classified databases, they found evidence of dozens of revolutionary discoveries that had been deemed too dangerous for public knowledge. Medical treatments that could have saved countless lives, communication technologies that could have bridged the gaps between species, energy systems that could have transformed civilization itself. All of it had been suppressed because it threatened the established order in some way. It's remarkable, Derek said, as they cataloged their latest discovery, a neural interface system that could have allowed direct mind-to-mind communication across species barriers. The sheer amount of knowledge that has been sacrificed to preserve the status quo. Avlithvar nodded grimly. And it's still happening. Even now, there are researchers being pressured to abandon projects that might challenge orthodox thinking. Their work was not going unnoticed. Derek began receiving visits from other archivists and researchers, individuals who had heard rumors of the unauthorized activities in the sealed vaults. Some came as spies for the council, but others came as potential ally scholars who had grown tired of the constraints imposed by institutional orthodoxy. Dr. Elena Vasquez was among the first to openly support their efforts. A human xenobiologist who had been studying Aruvian neural architecture, she brought both expertise and resources that proved invaluable in expanding their operations. I've been fighting these same battles for years, she told them during one of their clandestine meetings. Research proposals rejected because they challenge species-based assumptions, data suppressed because it suggests that biological limitations are more flexible than we've been taught. With each new ally, their alternative archive grew stronger. They established secure communication networks that allowed researchers from across the galaxy to share suppressed discoveries and collaborate on forbidden projects. The movement took on a life of its own, spreading far beyond Aruvia to encompass scholars and innovators throughout known space. But it was in the quiet moments when the frantic pace of their revolutionary activities slowed that Derek found his relationship with Avlithvar deepening into something beyond professional collaboration. They would work late into the night surrounded by holographic displays and data streams, their minds focused on the intricate puzzles of recovered research. And then, in the spaces between discoveries, they would find themselves talking about more personal things. Derek learned about Avlithvar's childhood in the Mindweaver caste, the pressure to excel and conform that had shaped her early years. She told him about the moment she had first realized that her research could help others, the excitement of discovery that had driven her to take increasing risks with her own safety. I used to dream about the day when neural trauma would be completely treatable, she said during one of these intimate conversations. When no one would have to accept biological limitations as permanent destiny. That dream isn't dead, Derek replied softly. What we're building here, it's going to make that possible. Avlithvar's smile was radiant in the soft glow of the crystal formations. Yes, but now I have other dreams too. Their first kiss happened in the archive garden at dawn, surrounded by bioluminescent flowers that pulsed with gentle rhythm of the crystal matrix. Derek had brought morning tea, continuing the tradition that had begun during Avlithvar's early days of silence. But now, their morning meetings had evolved into intimate conversations and shared plans for the future. I never expected this, Avlithvar said softly, her hand resting in Derek's, as they sat together on a bench carved from living crystal. When they brought me here as damaged goods, I thought my life was over. Derek squeezed her hand gently. You were never damaged goods. You were a brilliant researcher who had been silenced for threatening the wrong people. But you saw that when no one else did, she replied. You treated me as a person worth knowing, worth helping, worth caring about." Derek turned to face her, fully his heart racing with the intensity of emotion he saw in her violet eyes. "I love you, Avlithvar. Not despite what you've been through, but because of who you are and who you're becoming." Her response was to lean forward and kiss him, a gentle meeting of lips that tasted of possibility and new beginnings. When they broke apart, both were breathless with the magnitude of what they had acknowledged. "I love you too," she whispered. "You gave me back my voice, my mobility, my sense of purpose. But more than that, you helped me believe that I was worthy of love again." As the twin moons of Aruvia set behind the crystal spires of the archive, Derek and Avlithvar sat together in the growing dawn light, planning their future. Their alternative archive was already changing lives across the galaxy, offering hope to researchers and individuals who had been marginalized by orthodox thinking. But more than that, they had found in each other a partnership that transcended the boundaries of species and circumstance. Their love had grown from mutual respect and shared purpose into something that neither institutional oppression nor biological difference could diminish. "What do you think happens next?" Derek asked, as they watched the first rays of the system's primary star begin to illuminate the garden around them. Avlithvar leaned against his shoulder, her body warm and solid, thanks to the prosthetic system that had restored her mobility. "We continue the work," she said simply. "We preserve the suppressed knowledge, we support the silenced researchers, and we prove that truth is stronger than institutional power." Derek smiled, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "And we do it together." "Together," she agreed. And in that single word, Derek heard the promise of a future filled with discovery, purpose, and love. The archive crystals around them pulsed with gentle light, recording their conversation and their commitment for future generations to discover. Their story would be preserved here not as the Council would have told it, but as they had lived it, a tale of hope, reclaimed love discovered, and truth triumphant over oppression. In the end, that was perhaps the greatest revolution of all, the simple recognition that every individual, regardless of their biological limitations or social standing, deserved the chance to contribute their unique voice to the vast symphony of accumulated knowledge. And in the quiet garden of a terraformed moon, two scholars from different worlds had found in each other the courage to make that recognition a reality. Avlithvar's final thought as she sat in Derek's arms, watching the dawn light play across the crystal formations, was one of profound gratitude and quiet determination. She had been given to a human as damaged goods, a burden to be managed, rather than a person to be valued. But in Derek's love and support, she had found not just restoration, but transformation. She no longer needed the Council's recognition to feel whole. She had reclaimed her own story, written her own legacy, and found her own path forward. And with Derek at her side, she was ready to help others do the same, one suppressed truth and one recovered dream at a time. The future stretched before them, filled with challenges and possibilities in equal measure. But whatever came next, they would face it together, united by love and purpose, building a new kind of archive, where every voice could be heard and every story could be preserved in its full, unedited truth.